Right about now, you are listening to the Legacy and Leadership Podcast.
Lyric, us.
Happy year.
Still to be happy about.
You're up too old.
Job's not finished.
Legacy is what you leave behind. Leadership is how you are defined. Tomorrow, I don't know the sun gon' shine. So today, I'm trying to replenish my mind. Legacy, leader, yeah. Legacy, leaders, yeah. Legacy, leaders, yeah. Legacy.
Legacy leaders, welcome to the Legacy and Leadership Podcast, presented to you by the Legacy Leadership Learning Group. This is our live installments of Cold Brew and Convos with your L3G Coaches. This is your co-host, Jimmy Gonzalez Jr., and I am always here with my other co-host, Anthony Devon White.
Hey, what's going on, man? What's going on, leaders?
Yeah, host, co-host, you know how it goes. Remember, this is a podcast where, as a business owner, entrepreneur, we really teach you the X's and O's and what you need to know to build your business, to start your business, and really fundamentally do the things that you need to do to be a leader and a business owner worth following, so that you can then teach and develop your team on how to do the same. And as you build this business, leave a legacy for generations to come. Got a couple of things that we want to get into this evening as we, again, go through our Cold Brew Convos in this live episode. Over the last month, within April, we've been going through a series specifically focusing on what you need to do to protect your inner circle. And really going back to the first episode of April, we talked about 7 personality types that you should really, really be mindful of and ensuring that they are not in your inner circle. Then the episode that just dropped this morning, so for our Podbean crew out there, all of our loyal listeners, and even for our viewers on Facebook, if you follow our YouTube channel, the video is going to be dropping this evening. But that episode has dropped where we talk about why it's important to keep your inner circle small and really focusing on going deep. So really focusing on quality rather than quantity and making sure that you're really investing in those relationships that you have. So Devon and I wanted to finish up that series and focus on, all right, so if you notice that you have some personalities in there that do not need to be in a circle, maybe it's too big and you want to, kind of shrink that and pull it back some. How do you remove people from your inner circle that you know should not be there and it's really more of a hindrance and hurting you? That's what we're going to be discussing this evening, for sure.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to getting into this topic because I know it's probably, as we've done this series, the question that we've gotten asked the most about, right? Like, okay, I have this long-term relationship, with a friend. And it's actually funny. We had some friends that came down a couple of weeks ago. Shout out Dana and my boy Jay. But he and I were just chopping it up, and he was asking about the podcast. He was asking about some of the content that we've been kind of talking about, and he was just sharing his own experience about he's reaching that point in his life, right? Kind of his mid-20s, late 20s, where the maturation level of his friend group is so diverse. Like, it's probably one of the most diverse that it's ever been, right? You have friends who are still, trying to find their way, or maybe they're, living home with parents. You have others that have gone off and started to establish themselves in the world. You have others that have started to build families, right? And so because of that, he's starting to realize that the season is starting to pass with some of these friends, right? Like folks that, hey, I've been, we used to run the block in elementary and middle school. We went to the same high school. And then even after that, even though we moved on to college and stuff like that, like when we in the same city or if we're not going to the same school, we're still clicked up because we're used to that click, right? And then how do I expand beyond that? And we started getting to the discussion around like, well, how do you break up friendships, right? Like how do you break up from that relationship or move on in it? And I think, now more than ever, it's, I'll speak on my generation. We're not necessarily wired or have had that demonstrated to us, like how to navigate that, right? Like how to actually have the conversation. Like instead, what you mostly see happen is people get ghosted, right? You just like stop communicating altogether. It's like eventually they'll get the hint. I'm gonna try and avoid them. And that's not the mature way to approach those type of discussions or to approach that type of decision, right? Not to say that you owe the individual you have a relationship with a repeated explanation, but you should feel affirm that if you're making this decision because you feel like the season is past and your values don't align, or maybe you guys are motivated by different things, and you need to move in a different direction, you need to have that conversation, if not for the benefit of standing firm in your values. And so we'll get a chance to talk about that just a little bit, but I'm really hoping to not just break this down, but hopefully as we have people that pop in and are listening live, if you have some thoughts or some feedback or some questions around maybe ways that you've handled it, or ways that went well, also ways that it didn't go well, we would love to just engage in the discussion with you guys about that, because I think between Jimmy and myself, we'll both kind of share some of our experiences of when it went well and when it didn't go the best.
Yeah, I definitely consider that's not the type of situation that I've always handled the best. So for our listeners out there, 2 ways that you can engage. You can either call in and verbally ask your question and join in on the conversation. We would love for you to do that. Or you can just type in your question in the chat box, and we'll pose a question and discuss it. So before we do that, I just want to give a shout out to our listeners and our viewers for the comments that they've been leaving and just continuing to engage with us. The followers that we have, the community that we have within Podbean is continuing to grow. We had somebody that a couple of days ago just found out about the podcast, loves the podcast, and is, also, I guess, trying to start their own podcast and asking for tips. So we appreciate that. We even had somebody leave us a negative review, which was cool with us too. Yeah. We know that, this might not be for everybody, but that's okay, because our tribe out there, our community that appreciates the content, the conversations, and what we're bringing to the table, that's what this is for. So continue to leave comments, positive, negative, regardless. We like the feedback. It definitely continues to drive us to want to continue to get better and improve on what we're doing. But again, knowing this is not going to be for everybody. But if you are an entrepreneur, if you're a small business owner, that is who we're looking to speak to. We want to make sure that we're providing you with content to really, again, start your business, launch your business, and not just get it, but keep it long term. And again, leaving a legacy for your community and for your family as well, for generations to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
But man, before we get into that, I haven't had a chance to really speak to you because we got on and jumped on to the live. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. Same old as far as working, all that other good stuff is concerned. I'm really just looking forward to 2 things. I got 2 things on the calendar as big things this upcoming weeks. The first being that this Friday is when Mortal Kombat should be hitting HBO Max, so definitely got to watch that. Can't wait. And then again, for those that have been following us, we're avid sports fans, so I got my eye on the draft. I've been waiting to see how that plays out. So
yes.
Draft. So I'm just looking forward to those things, man. And honestly, it was just most of today. Like, man, I can't wait to pod. Like, I can't wait to pod. Like, all the other stuff I was doing, like, man, I can't wait to get a chance to pod. So I'm excited to be here, man.
That's good, bro. That's good. Yeah, I'm excited as well. I've had a good day, man. Good day, like you said, kind of a typical day, a normal day. I'm getting ready to watch, I think this is second to last episode of Snowfall. So talking about your inner circle and finding people that shouldn't be in your inner circle, and how Franklin St. Clair had to take care of some folks. If you follow that show, drugs, guns, it's all good. My wife always wondered why I watch so many shows that kind of revolve around the same topic, but it's just, I like it. It's good entertainment. But yeah, again, focusing on who you have in your inner circle, and when you find somebody that you know should not be there. But we're not going to give any tips on how Franklin has taken care of people and gotten them out of his inner circle. But yeah, definitely, like I said, excited about that. And Queen of the South, again, another similar show, drugs, guns. But it comes out, they both come out on 10 o'clock on Wednesday. But I've been rocking with Snowfall. Again, it's coming to the end of the season. So I've been watching that, and then I'll wait till, I don't know, sometime this weekend to watch Queen of the South. But trying to be mindful of, the time that's invested in watching TV. Plus, we do a lot of potting, man. So we're focusing on the videos. Again, we had episode 38 that just dropped. The video is just about done. I'm uploading it to YouTube. So the video will be published really, really soon within, I'll say before 10 o'clock for our folks out there that like the visual experience. Super glad about how the last Cold Brew Convos has went. Over 100, somewhat downloads on that. So getting a lot of good feedback on that episode. So again, excited and ready to jump into this conversation regarding removing someone from your inner circle, which can be a rough experience, right? Maybe, somebody in your inner circle could be a friend, a family member. They're just not behaving normal, or like they've behaved in the past, or you just kind of mentioned in the intro of what you described as far as the folks that you were spending some time with. Things change as we get older, as we get into different points of our life. Sometimes we go down a different path, and we make certain decisions for the better, sometimes for the worse. And you realize, you know what, it's not to my benefit to have this person in my inner circle. Now, that doesn't mean that you get rid of them completely. Again, we talked about this in a podcast episode. Feed them with a long spoon. Make sure that you set up some boundaries. You keep them, at a distance. Not necessarily, again, getting them out of your life. And sometimes you have to do that too, based on what they're into, what decisions they've made. If you know that it is not healthy mentally, physically, spiritually for you, you may have to cut those folks off completely. So again, things change. Maybe they're not going to go back to how they used to be. So steps that you need to take, again, in order to really remove somebody from your inner circle.
Yeah. I love the fact that you brought up, like, one, it's definitely not easy, but you also don't want to have some type of knee-jerk reaction the minute that you start noticing you guys are growing apart, to immediately say, all right, I got to cut ties, right? Like, it comes down to identifying, like, are the changes that you're observing, are they situational in nature? Is there something else, right? We talk a lot about seeking to understand, but is there something else underlying that's driving this type of behavior, this type of response from this person that you've obviously built a relationship with over time? But I think it's also important to acknowledge that once you identify that, okay, this is not a situational thing, this is truly rooted in, one of those 7 signs of a toxic personality, right? Of this person being a manipulator, this person being, maybe a vampire, this person being, maybe highly egotistical. And so that their actions are rooted in jealousy, not necessarily like jealousy, malice, not your best interest. Now you have to act on it, right? Now you actually have to go through the process of creating those boundaries, feeding them with a long spoon, and then maybe ultimately being able to separate them, right? And I think the goal obviously is to, if you're doing it right, if you're doing it from a mature perspective, right, to be able to clearly set expectations, set boundaries, or address the fact that you guys have grown distant and you need to make a different decision with how you spend your time. But to be able to do so without trying to intentionally, and intentionally is the operative word, hurt feelings, right? Because there's no value in breaking down that relationship and throwing away the years of just good memories and experiences and all that other stuff, right? Like, that season was great. We're in a different season right now, and so being able to balance that, and so I think that's kind of the key. And the last thing that I'll just kind of say before, wanting to hear a little bit more from you on this approach, right, is, not just making sure that you're not hurting them in your initial discussion, but if for whatever reason the discussion gets confrontational and they begin to push back, like, don't let their reaction take you out of your composed, mature, kind of like rooted in logic and sound decision making, approach or communication, right? Like, just don't do it. Don't engage, right? Because for me, I take that as a sign of this is just a further, additional validation that I'm making the right decision. Because if you can't even respect the way that I'm coming at you and having this mature discussion around the decision that I need to make, and now I'm hearing about all of these things that you don't like about me, this, that, you don't believe in me, you don't believe in what I'm doing, you think you're gonna run a little business, you don't know nothing about business, you don't know nothing about this, right? You think you're gonna be successful, you wouldn't be nothing without me. All of those things are, and I think our listeners may have heard or seen this before, but all of those things typically are rooted in true feelings that they didn't divulge before. Now that they're divulging, so that existed along with the the good moments, right? And so it's just affirmation that it's time to move on. The season has passed, and that you need to move on. Now that's how it should go. Ideally, I'm definitely interested to hear kind of your thoughts on it, and then I can talk about a couple of examples for me personally where that is not how it went ideally, and then how I've had to deal with that.
I typically kind of have like a FU mentality, a forget you mentality, which has not necessarily served me well or my relationships in the past. And you mentioned confrontational. I guess it depends on the situation. There's times where I can be very forceful and confrontational. There are a lot of times where, I'd rather just, step back. So there's been situations where the relationship changes, or maybe something in me changes, right? And I see myself going in a different direction. And instead of, again, this is in the past, instead of really having that conversation with the person, because that's what it really boils down to, is communication. I would just step back, and all of a sudden the phone calls are not as frequent. The time spent together is not as frequent. And then you're leaving that person, especially, again, this is a friend, this could be a family member, somebody you really care about, leaving them with questions, right? And again, it may be something that not necessarily that they've done, but something deeper has changed, but it's happened in you. And I just realized, okay, for me to go again in this new direction and make some positive changes in my life, I might need to separate myself a little bit. But again, that's what you should not do, right? Is not communicate, not speak to the individual. Just be present, in taking the steps to trying to break off the friendship, or at least the closeness that you have, right? Because again, we're talking about removing somebody from your inner circle. So it doesn't mean that they're not on the outer circle, but just scheduling some time, reaching out to them, like, hey, I've been going through some things. There's some feelings that I have, some things that I want to express. I really, would like to have that conversation with you. And like you said, if it's something that they're doing your best to explain to them your point of view, where you're coming from, it can really be, kind of that that old thing that we say, right? Well, it's really not you, it's me.
It's me. It's me.
But in reality, that's what it is, right? It's I'm at a different point where I just can't rock with that anymore. I can't rock with that mentality. I can't rock with the things that you're doing, with the business that you're into. When I say business, how the individual is looking to provide for themselves. It could be a situation where they're doing something illegal. You just never know. And I can't be around that anymore. I've also seen situations where, you're growing and you realize that this other person, they're not they're very static, they're very comfortable, and they just want to stay in that space. And it gets to a point where, man, I love you and I still want to be around you, but like, I'm trying to have different conversations. I'm trying to talk about these things. I'm trying to progress and move forward. And if that's not what you're looking to do, then inevitably, kind of natural, like the conversations just tend to get a little bit boring. Like I think about, past relationships and folks that I grew up with in high school. Like how many times are we going to continue to talk about what happened back in the day and reminisce on stories from high school? Like, bro, I'm 44 years old. I love you. But like, can we create new memories? Can we do some new things? Talk about, the things that you're trying to accomplish from your career perspective, things that you're doing with your kids to again, provide a solid foundation and a legacy, for your family, whether that's generational wealth or the things that you're teaching spiritually, the road that you're leading your family down, talking about things, again, that are looking forward, right? So forward thinking as opposed to looking into the past and always having conversations like that. So those are typically, for me, the situations that I found myself in that I've realized, okay, I have to start making some different decisions and having some conversations with folks to just really explain. And sometimes it just kind of naturally happens. And it's like, you know what, you naturally start to kind of, have distance within that relationship and realize that it's not serving us as, mutually. It's not serving the same type of purpose and benefit. And that might sound weird for folks out there, but it shouldn't always be about what I can give or what I can take, from this individual. We're coming in as two individuals to provide friendship, to provide love, to provide inspiration, encouragement, direction, whatever it may be. And if we're not to be, if we're not able to truly mutually benefit each other, again, we're not talking about completely breaking somebody off, but I just really need to have that conversation and remove you from my inner circle. Obviously not necessarily using those words, but hey, maybe we just need to separate some different things that I'm on. I feel like, I'm being called and being led in a different direction. And I love you. I just don't know that with the things I'm doing right now that I'm going to have enough time to be able to invest, knowing that I just don't feel like the relationship is healthy for either one of us. Mm-hmm. So I have to be the one to make that decision if they especially don't see it themselves.
Yeah, man. There's a couple of things that you actually touched on, which I love. First is I'm reminded of this quote that I heard from Steve Stout. Steve Stout is a well-known, marketing guru, hip-hop marketing guru, brand ambassador, brand builder. Mm-hmm. And, he was chopping it up on this podcast, and somebody was asking him, like, hey, man, how do you know when a relationship has run its course, right? Because obviously, Steve being, as prominent in the game as he has, he came up with maybe, his friends, building something with his friends, mm-hmm. and then has gone off to continue to grow as a businessman, as a thought leader, as a businessman, and his friends may have not, right? And so he said something that was so profound to me, which was like, if the nature of your conversations every time you get around these individuals, an individual is always about what it was, right? Like mm-hmm. what it used to be, then that's usually a sign that you need to let it be.
I like that. Yeah.
Right? This is usually a sign that you need to let it be, right? Like if all we're going to be focusing on is what it used to be, it's usually a sign that you need to let it be. And so, facts. That really resonated with me, just kind of what you're sharing, because if the nature of our conversation is always, like you said, man, back in high school, back in this, back in the goal is always about growth in every facet of our life, mm-hmm. Right? Obviously, we spend quite a bit of time talking about entrepreneurship and building a business as the vehicle, because we know in order to do that, all the other facets have to be on point. Your family life, your spiritual walk, right? Sharpening your saw, your health, your wellness, all that stuff has to be on point in order for this vehicle of entrepreneurship and business building in order to be successful. But again, it's about growth. So I don't want the greatest thing I've ever accomplished to be when I was in high school.
Yeah, facts.
You feel me? Like if that's it, right? That those 4 years are the most fruitful years of my life, right? So I'm, you start at, for me, I started at age 13. I graduated by age 17, right? Average life expectancy for an adult in America is right into like 75, right? So we're gonna call it like another 58 years. Like, fam, so you're telling me I got another 58 years of worse than high school? Like, just put that in perspective, you know what I mean? So I love the fact that, like, being aware of that. And the other thing I would say too, and I think what would make this probably a little bit more difficult for our listeners, right, is because we also pride ourselves on being leaders, right? On truly being leaders, and we know that being a leader also means servantship. It means sacrifices, means growth. It means helping people, and so you have that internal struggle of, man, but this is my man's though. Like, how do I I can't abandon him. I have to, I'm trying to serve him. I'm trying to, right? I need to lead him, right? He's doing all these bad things. Like, if I could just get in there and I could just lead them, and from my own experience, what I would share with our listeners, right, is that we all know that a fundamental component of being an effective leadership is having individuals who want to be led, right? It's having individuals who want to be led, and I would even take it a step further to not just say having individuals who want to be led, but also individuals that in various moments can also lead you, right? Like, the individuals that I surround myself with, the leadership, ball, if you want to call it, right, gets passed between us in a litany of interactions, right? Like, one moment, hey, I may be called to lead because of the mental space I'm in and what I know at this time, right? And so I'm helping to lead through that. In another moment, the person that I was leading through, maybe a financial situation is now helping to lead me through a fatherhood situation, right? Because they have more experience in that. And so it has to be, like you said, this give and take of the relationship. It can't just be, I'm the only one that's providing the leadership, but I can't get led out of this relationship. Because if you're in that dynamic, that's when you're unequally yoked. That's when you start finding out that, hey, this relationship is not as fruitful. And staying in a less than fruitful relationship can actually be the seeds to resentment, right? Like, I loved because you brought this up, but like, you're saying, like, man, this is not mutually beneficial for both of us. And that's not, tongue in cheek or passive aggressive to be like, hey, I'm going to say that, hey, you're not benefiting from this, even though I think I'm not the problem here. It's not that. It's genuinely acknowledging that if they are not in a position where they want to naturally grow or mature or move away from the things that they're doing, how do you think it makes them feel when you're in the space and you're not on that same page and you're not reciprocating that energy? It's like, damn, this cat, do you think you better than me? Man, I don't even want to talk to bro. Like, he, uptight, he a little stuck up, like, and it's not that at all. It doesn't come from that. It's just like, man, I'm not on that energy. So it can't be mutually beneficial for you if you look at me as a reflection of your shortcomings. I don't want you to look at me as your friend, as somebody who cares for you, as merely a reminder or a reflection of your shortcomings. That's not what I'm here to provide. I'm supposed to be a reflection of your potential, a reflection of your growth, right? Because you should be able to look at me and I see growth, and I should be able to look at you and see the growth that I've made. And if I'm looking at you and I can't see the growth, and you're looking at me and you can't see the growth, then fam, how are we going to benefit from this, right? So I felt compelled to kind of share those things after listening to you, man, because you really were just dropping some nuggets along the way. And I know that a lot of our listeners, our legacy leaders that may be listening are like, but bruh, like, how can I turn my back on dude? Like, we went through all of this together. And it brings me back to the point that you've made a couple of times as we've gone through this series, right? Which is, again, this is for a season. There's nothing to say that this won't come back around. That when they grow, and we've all been there, hell, we've been there as kids with our parents. We may have had that moment where we wasn't understanding what they were on and why they were being so hard. And he was like, oh, you just always trying to remind me of how I'm coming up short. And then we grew and we matured and we came right back around to our parents like, hey, you was right back then. Back then, I was tripping. You were right. Like, I really appreciate the way that you loved on me. I really appreciate the fact that you navigated that situation the way that you did. And that same type of discussion or dynamic can exist with your friends. And that's why it's important that when you're having that discussion, it's rooted in still empathy, still love, still care, but also being strong enough as leaders to make the decisions that most people can't. That's why we're in leadership positions, right? To make the decision that most people can and most people want and step away, because eventually the season may change and they may need to come back around, and you don't want them to harbor resentment about how you guys ended up separating.
Yeah. One thing that you mentioned that stood out to me too is like, man, like I don't want the best things that I've accomplished to be in high school. In that same tone, though, like I don't want what we've accomplished, the best things that we've accomplished together, to be 5, 10, 15 years ago. So even when I look at our relationship, man, like I go back to Trinity Fitness, and obviously we were in business together from an employment standpoint, right? So teammates and working together there. But when, asked you to be a board member, the first board member that we had for Trinity Fitness, besides Stacy and myself, and working together on those things. When we were working together and helping this politician with marketing and publicity and ad campaigns and things of that nature, and social media marketing, again, working together and trying to accomplish some things and doing some things. As we continue to move on and progress, even if we weren't necessarily in business together, but accomplishing things together. And then forget all that stuff as far as like entrepreneurship. But even again, in the workplace, how many things that as a team did we collectively accomplish together? So there's a continuation. Again, it gets back to the mindset. It gets back to the trajectory that we're on, and realizing that, man, no, I want to continue to build with this individual because we're like-minded. Not exactly alike, but we're like-minded. And again, we have similar visions for ourselves, for our team, for our family. And because of that, we're continuing to build a legacy together, individually, separately, but also as a team. And if I can't say like, man, when's the last time that we really, even if it's not, something, I'm using those examples because again, we're speaking to entrepreneurs and small business owners. But even if it's like, man, when's the last time that we had like a really meaningful, profound conversation where you taught me something, or I taught you something, or I shared an experience that shifted the paradigm for you and had you seeing things and opening your eyes in a completely different way, or you held me accountable and you said something to me that, that I needed to hear, even if I didn't want to hear it. Like if we're not having those type of conversations and again, continue to foster that type and that deep of a relationship, then like, bro, like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? And it just gets to a point where I have to be honest with you. Honesty is the best policy. I have to be honest with you in how I'm feeling. And then listen, make sure that you listen to your friend, to your business partner, whoever this individual is. It could be a family member. Listen to that individual, try to get a better understanding of where they're coming from too. But if you know that, no, this is the decision that I've made, and I really feel like there needs to be some distance between us, like stick to your guns. Like don't go back on that, and just make sure that you follow through on that decision that you made, knowing that in the long run, again, it's going to be best, not just for you, but for your friend or your family member or this, this business partner that you may have.
No, man. Well said, man. Well said. And I think people can hopefully appreciate like the passion that we're speaking about this topic with comes from one, an understanding that everything that we do from a success perspective, from a legacy perspective, comes down to the relationships that we're able to build and establish, right? Like, gosh, I was having this conversation. I forgot how we got on it. I was having this conversation with Gabriella about a little bit about legacy, but also about like people passing and what happens when you pass and all of that. And one of the things I was just bringing up to her, we were talking about like why would people want to ensure that their gravesite would like be visited in the future, and why is that important? And I was just sharing with her like, yeah, like kind of one of the scariest things for folks, when they think about their mortality and passing and moving on, is the fear that your memory, who you are as an individual, get lost to time, right? Because like, actually, I know exactly how we got on it, because we were having the conversation around DMX passing. Right, we were listening to the Joe Budden podcast, and they were chopping it up about that, and they were saying that even though he's 50 something years old, that the impact that he's had, is equivalent to 100. Like he lived 100 years, right, in terms of his impact. And Joe actually went on to say like, well, for me, I actually feel like it's almost like maybe like 200, 300 years in terms of how the people he touched, what he meant to a culture, what he meant to people, will reverberate through time, right?
Yeah.
There's these names that we continue to hear about or hold on to that have literally survived time, right? I was watching on HBO Max, I was watching this documentary. It was talking about like people that have shaped history and the decisions that they make. And I've always been an Alexander the Great fan. Like I've just been compelled by his story. I've been compelled by his vision. I've been compelled by his shortcomings as a leader. And to think that like we still talk about Alexander the Great, Alexander the Third, right? From Macedonia, who took over for his father after his father was killed by his royal guard. Became king of Greece essentially at the age of 19, 20, and then went on to build the largest empire that the world had ever known, right? And this is back in antiquity, right? So you're talking about, like, again, before the rise of the Roman Empire, before all of those things. And here we are in 2021 on a podcast with technology that Alexander the Great could never even fathom would really ever exist.
Yeah.
Still mentioning his name. His name is not lost to time. And that's because of relationships. That's because of the impact that he had on folks that he came into contact with, those that he conquered, all of those things, right? So where I bring that back is when we're talking about, something as simple as, your inner circle and, making those decisions, delivering difficult news, because these are obviously difficult conversations, we still come back to talking about the empathy, the care, and, honoring the relationship, even if the relationship is moving into another season, right? Because when you talk about the legacy that you build, there have been individuals that I've had to have difficult conversations with, you've had to have difficult conversations with, maybe it impacted their employment, maybe it was whatever, right? That in the moment, it was anger, frustration, all understandably so, because what that meant for the situation they were in, that years later, when they came back around and they were able to mature, they were, hey, bro, I just want to let you know I really appreciated how you handled this situation. I really appreciated how you communicated this. I really appreciated how you really tried to mold and shape and develop me. And I fell short. I had to learn along the way. But now that I've grown, I can see, right? So that's why we keep coming back to this message of how you communicate this, how you communicate the breakup, how do you communicate, being affirmed in your decision, not backtracking on that, but also still being empathetic, still being caring, still being understanding as you're delivering this difficult news, because it comes down to relationships, guys. It all comes down to relationships. All right. And, whether you're building a business, whether you're building a family, whether you're truly like building your legacy comes down to the relationships and how you shepherd those relationships, steward those relationships. That will ensure that your name is not lost, your impact is not lost to time. All right. So again, that's why we are speaking as passionately as we are about this stuff, man, because it truly is important. Like everything that we talk about with the podcast, everything that we coach on, when working with business leaders and businesses, it comes down to that. Like, how do you make the most out of these relationships?
Yeah, because in the end, it doesn't matter, about the widget, about the product, about the service. We're all ultimately in the business of people. And when you're talking about being in the business of people, you're talking about relationships. And I think it's important, you mentioned like just approach the situation with love. And when you do that, the words that you use tend to be kinder, they tend to be gentler. And as you said, that person really realizes that they realize your heart and where you're coming from. And ultimately to that, like it does hurt. Like, bro, I love you. You know what I mean? Like you said, like you my man. It's like we've done some things together, but I just realized that like sometimes things have to change. And but listening to them and again gaining their perspective. So we have a question. The magnificent, wonderful Elena Giselle, one of our loyal listeners, legacy leader in the making. How do you tell the difference between a friend who needs your help and one who is a detriment to you?
Great question. So I can kind of share my experiences because it's twofold. Sometimes behaviors can be masked as I don't know the best way to say it, like can be masked as like false acknowledgement or humility, like a desire to want to get better, but their actions don't align with that. So first thing I would say is if a friend truly has a desire to grow, they're having conversations with you about growth, right? About your growth, about their own growth. They're usually expressing or confiding in you their desires, their aspirations, and it's rooted in something that would call them to be greater than what they are today.
Yeah.
Right. Like the conversations, I think about the conversations that you and I have had over the years, from our very first convo, 12, 13, 14 plus years ago. I mean, time is just flying. But our first conversation was really rooted in me expressing to you a desire to be something that would require me to be greater than the person and the leader that I was that day. Right. And so that's definitely an indicator that, hey, they want help, they need help, right? And they are genuinely either seeking it out so they can grow in these areas. But then it's also twofold, right? It's not just merely a conversation about what they can get from you, but they're willing to try and love on you as well and share openly something new that they learned that in hopes of helping you in your growth. If the conversations are not centered around that, not centered around aspirations that require them to be more than what they are today, not centered around checking in with you and finding out again like what's going on with you and how are you doing, right? And let me have those type of conversations. If it's not centered in that, then usually that's probably a person that's a detriment. And actually, this is a good segue too because we just spent our most recent NBA series talking with Sunil Gotsi, who will be dropping that episode with for our legacy leaders here pretty shortly next week. And the gist of our conversation was really rooted in the power of intuition, right? The power of intuition. What is intuition? The science behind intuition, because it's not just this abstract, obscure notion. And what does it mean to be attuned with your intuition and your signals of intuition and listen to those and execute on those. And so in true Sunil fashion, I'm pretty sure if he's listening, he appreciate this, which is, your intuition also play a part in there too. Like, in these interactions, if you're listening to your intuitive signals, nah, man, this is not where I need to be. This is not fruitful for me. There's no benefit here. Like, I feel outside of my element. I feel I feel like if other folks that knew me and knew my growth or knew how I was trying to grow came in and caught me in this interaction right now with this person around this person, they would look at me weird, like, this doesn't align with the conversations we have, right? And for me personally, it took me having a couple of those moments for me to realize, yeah, okay, there's certain relationships that I need to take a step back from, right? Certain relationships I need to take a step back from. And so, yeah, those are the things I would give you. Again, if they really want to grow, you're going to feel that intuitively, and the conversations are going to reflect that. They're going to be talking to you about their aspirations that require them to be a greater person than they are today. And they're also going to want to make sure that you're growing in the process, right? Because it's not about, again, perfection, right? It's about direction.
By direction, yeah.
And so if they're trying to head in the right direction, that'll be apparent. And if it's a detriment, you'll feel it intuitively. And again, all the conversations, like we said, are going to be about what used to be, not what will be. And again, like Steve Stout said, that's a sign you need to let it be.
Yeah. And even, going back to episode 37 and the 7 toxic personality types, right? Using that as a barometer to say, okay, I'm starting to sense something intuitively. I'm hearing things. I'm seeing things. This person is reminding me of this, somebody who has this ego, somebody who is draining me of my energy. Now, when you start to have those conversations, if you realize that, again, there's a deeper issue, a deeper challenge going on with that individual, then yeah, how do you help? And maybe it's, again, in that conversation, hey, this is what I've noticed. These are the facts. These are the observations that I've made. These are the decisions I've seen you make. These are the things I've heard you say. And because of that, I feel like there needs to be some separation. Having said that, I still love you, and I want to be able to try to help you. I want to be able to provide you with some advice. Maybe if it's just saying, hey, maybe you should get some counseling and talk to somebody, and helping them through that situation. Then also, as you provide tips, tactics, suggestions, maybe you even give them a phone number or a website, and then you follow up. To talk to me, we realize that, man, there's some things going on. I gave you some suggestions of people that you could speak to. Some resources are available to you. What steps did you take? And if you see that this individual is not taking those steps, right? They're not seeking help. They're not seeking to get better and improve. Again, maybe it's mentally, emotionally, spiritually, a situation they're going through. Then again, that's a strong indicator that, I'm going to have to start to pull back, because I'm pouring out, right? You talked about, you mentioned energy earlier. So I'm expending calories. I'm giving energy, but that same type of energy is not coming back, in the sense of they're not taking action. They're not doing things. So do they really want help? And if I get the sense that they don't, then I definitely not only do I need to pull back, but maybe, again, I may need to just kind of cut it off completely, or cut it off for a time. But just, paying attention to their reaction, and are they going to at least try, right? It doesn't mean that things change or things, progress tremendously overnight, but are they at least trying to improve that situation? Again, it can be mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and kind of take those keys as you're observing the actions that they take or do not take.
No, absolutely, man.
Great question. Great. Yeah. So I guess to wrap it up is, being, even with that last example that we just gave, being very thoughtful and conscious of your friend's feeling, your family members' feelings, when you're talking about what actually went wrong, and maybe things that they can, probably should, really consider doing differently. Again, talk about the facts, but be ready, for folks that have their feelings hurt. Sometimes, as you mentioned earlier, Devon, people get defensive. Think about, it's funny, I did a lunch and learn this afternoon on effective communication skills and preparing to deliver a message. Right. And one of the tips is, when you think about the audience and who you're going to speak to, and this message that you're going to deliver, is also thinking about what type of reaction may they have. Is it going to be excitement? Are they going to be hurt? Are they going to be pissed off? What are the possible, especially if you know this person, what are the possible reactions that they can have? And then thinking about, how am I going to handle that reaction and that situation when we get in there? What can I say? What should I say? So it may not have happened, but at least if it does and it gets to that point, you've ran the play in your mind. You've gone through it, you've ran it a few times, and you have a better idea and understanding of how to handle and approach that situation if people's feelings get hurt or people get pissed off and there's hostility that may arise out of the situation.
Yeah, man, great advice. Agreed.
And then finally, I think it's important too to take some time for yourself when you're talking about a friendship. When you're talking about, you don't necessarily, I want to say, lose a family member. You might get into an argument or feel like, I need to step back, from this family member. But like when you realize that like the relationship may never be the same, you know what I mean? And just taking time for yourself, if you need to just kind of mourn the loss of the friendship itself, or to mourn the loss of what that used to be, so that you can properly go through it in your mind, in your heart, in your spirit. And then once you've gone through that process and again, have kind of digested that, right, then, you'll be able to move forward in a much more healthier and a much more effective way.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's almost a requirement, right? Like you really do need to give yourself that space, and you shouldn't feel embarrassed or ashamed or conflicted by that. Like, you can mourn the loss of a relationship while still knowing that separating the relationship or moving on is still the right thing for you.
Yeah,
it's still the right thing for you, and that goes for again, friendships. That goes for personal relationships. Again, having experienced that myself, like, you can mourn the relationship and the experiences that you had while also knowing that this is the right decision for you, based off of where you want to be. Not just trying to hold on to what you were.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a boom. Lots of golden nuggets that we've dropped. So, legacy leaders, we appreciate you guys. We talked about Sunil Ghazi, who is the next guest on our Mentored by Adversity series. Definitely stay tuned for that. That is going to be dropping next week. And if you haven't listened to the episode that just dropped on Wednesday, April 21st, make sure that you listen to that. So as always, God bless and stay encouraged, y'all. Until next time.